Hey, what's up guys? I'm Raga.
I'm Brad.
And today we're going to do a video on the Moto versus the Switchblade, and I wanted to mix things up. I've done a video on this before, probably 2 years ago now. Brad actually has been riding the Moto for like, I think 2 years?
Yeah, a couple years. Yeah, the first year came out and on the current year now. So yeah, I came over from the Switchblade.
Yeah, you were on the Switchblade for like, what, 7 years?
Yeah, since the beginning of time kind of.
Beginning of time, yeah, since the first Switchblade.
Yeah, I guess I rode the first Kite Cabrinha made in 2001, so for like 20 years. So every model, but yeah, currently Switchblade. I still have a lot of Switchblades.
Yeah.
Still, that's my go-to in a lot of conditions. But for 12 meter, like the Moto, that's the one for me.
So yeah, for perspective, I think we got the right guy to talk to and get a fresh perspective beyond my own on these two kites. Let's dive into this one.
All right, so yeah, why would I pull out the Switchblade versus the Moto? My muscle memory, my perspective has been like fully Switchblade. Everything Switchblade, you know, prior to the Moto.
Sure.
So the Moto came out. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Definitely want the big air for sure. Want the power. So I was a little slightly skeptical. Like, am I going to lose some of that feel? There's one less set of struts. So in one way, that's a little simpler on the setup. You're putting a little less air into the kite. You get up a little quicker, but that wasn't really a driving factor.
Yeah, so you mentioned like the feel. So my first thought is, and I think a lot of people wonder this, how does the Moto feel on the water compared to the Switchblade? Like the bar pressure, the way it responds.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, I think overarching, the primary word I would use is playful. It's just
for the Moto?
For the Moto, yeah. The Moto is just a little more playful. It is lighter on the bar. The Switchblade has just got that grunt. It feels a little more like, okay, if I'm going to move it through space, I got to give a little more input. In some ways, there's a little more feedback, so that feels good.
I always like that about the Switchblade, especially in gusty winds.
Right.
The really like consistent feedback that I got from the Kite. I still prefer the Switchblade personally for that reason.
Absolutely, and you know, when I think of gusty, like how do you define that? To me, if I'm looking at the wind range, if it's more of a 10% delta, that's when I start to feel it. So if it's blowing 20 knots, if it's going like 18 to 22, whether I'm on the Switchblade or the Moto, I wouldn't really care. If it's, you know, ranging more than that, I would feel more comfortable on the Switchblade. I would notice the gusts less. But if we're talking a summer day, a beautiful 12 meter summer day, it's blowing 18 to 20. That Moto, it's just like you're in your board shorts, everything's good, the sun is out. The kite is very, again, playful. It's loose. I mean, those are kind of subjective terms, but it just feels lighter on your fingertips.
I agree with that 100%.
Okay, you feel that too?
That's I think that was my main point from my last review 2 years ago, is just how much more, like significantly more playful the Moto was to the Switchblade.
Okay. Did you feel you gave up anything for that playfulness?
I thought that I gave up some range, but some of it was perceived range because the bar pressure on the Switchblade is deceiving. You'll feel like you have power on the low end. You don't actually have, I mean, you do have extra power, but not as much as you think. It's kind of an illusion of the bar pressure.
Right. So riding the Moto 12 meter, mostly twin, mostly summertime. That's just when I was out on this thing. A bit on the foil, really fun on the foil. Like when there's not quite enough wind to get going and you're kind of like, okay, I need a big kite or a bigger board or something. The 12 meter Moto, very nice fit on the foil. Really enjoyed that. And on the foil, part of that is when I'm on the foil, you know, I'm not that great on the foil. When I'm on the foil, I'm not moving that kite around crazy. I'm just trying to keep everything together. And the Moto, you know, if you're not getting super aggressive with it, you're not going to really notice, I would say, any of the shortcomings compared to the Switchblade.
Which has a ton of grunt and kind of can pull you off that foil a bit. Yeah.
That's right.
I think the Moto's more forgiving in that sense.
For sure.
Kind of an interesting hybrid where it's like a little bit of a wave kite, but it's not really a true wave kite. It just doesn't have as much low end as a lot of the other.
So did you in making a loop for purposes of either redirecting the kite or actually making a loop to make power? Did you play around with that on the Switchblade versus the Moto?
I did. You know, truth be told, as well, I learned on the Switchblade as well. My first kite, I think, was a 2010 Switchblade. So a kite that I'm honestly just more familiar with. But I also prefer to loop with like the Switchblades, you know, up to like probably 10 meter is kind of where I draw the line, but I've definitely done it as well, like on the 12s and things like that. Not kite loops, not like 25 feet in the air, like hand drags, dark slides, low loop base tricks like that. I still prefer the Switchblade for those. I like the consistent kind of whoosh with it. Whereas the Moto felt, to me, more chaotic, like light bar pressure, didn't quite know where it was, and then it was a more like, for me, I thought it was a more like abrupt, like, what's happening? Whoa, there it is. And I don't know if that was your experience, but I felt the Switchblade's more of a gradual loop.
Totally. And again, I'm kind of in those sizes you're talking about, like 10, 12 meter. And for looping and looping for power, looping on transitions, definitely the Switchblade. That's the way to go. I agree with that. The Moto, that would be a reason to choose. If you're like, I'm going to loop my brains out, then go Switchblade. The Moto will do what you tell it to, but it's not going to feel and look great, frankly. And you're going to hear something that you won't hear on the Switchblade with that, loss of the extra set of struts. Moto has less struts. There's a little more leech or cloth that's unsupported. You don't really notice that when you're going back and forth and doing transitions with the kite over the top or slow down loops. But if you get aggressive with it, you're going to hear that leech flap. And you're going to see it, you're going to hear it. It's not a huge deal. It's something that you're going to notice, and it's kind of telling you like, I'll do it, but this isn't the ideal optimal use of my design.
You should try a single strut.
I'm sure.
The less struts, for sure, you get a little more flutter, a little less. I think on to some other points. What are your thoughts on the all-around capabilities, like waves and things like that? Do you have a preference?
Yeah, well, I'm a little spoiled in that regard because I'm kind of, for my writing here in West Michigan, there's, we never have waves without a lot of wind, in my estimation. So I have a drifter kite that's small for the wave days.
Smart choice.
And then, so I don't have an all-round. If I was gonna, I guess your question is all-round kite. If I could just pick one kite, one model, I would do the Switchblade.
You would?
It's got the largest wind range.
Definitely.
I like to jump. The Switchblade to me is optimal for jumping. It works okay in the waves, but you do have to pay attention to it when you're going down the line. It's easier to slackline that kite. That thing, that Switchblade, it's part of why it boosts. It's kind of up in the window, and it wants to
drive forward.
It wants to go forward, and when you're trying to go at the kite down the line, it doesn't handle that as well.
Not really made for that, so it makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So, but if I had to pick one, it'd definitely be a Switchblade.
Yeah, I used to kite surf with a Switchblade, and I would usually go like one, maybe two sizes down, and that way I was always working the kite, which was a lot of work on my end, but I was always moving the kite preemptively so that when I was digging in an edge, I was always kind of placing the kite, which
always
is
up over the top.
You're always placing the. It's not the best way to do it, but it just it worked for me.
I think most people do. They keep it moving up high, and I found like with a Switchblade that doesn't inherently want to stay deeper in the window like a drifter would. I've just gotten really into the habit of looping that kite, corkscrewing it, which is fantastic. Except for once in a while when things don't go as planned. And you catch,
this powerful kite. Like, that's why you got to size down.
Right. Or even catching the water because you're giving and taking that line loading as you're surfing, and while you're looping the kite, it's only finishing the turns when you got that line load. So you're kind of, your window of screwing up is a lot smaller when you're looping the kite while you're going down the line.
Definitely. And I think to that end, personally, if I were going in the waves, I'd probably do a moto just because of the lack of the low end, more maneuverable. Again, you can kind of use that strategy of like moving the kite, but now you don't have to stress about like sizing down for the waves. But yeah, all in all, personally, I would pick Switchblade over Moto. But just my 2 cents. I've made that clear on the channel. But a lot of other guys like you, and we just talked to Mark Hooksema, he loves it, and all the locals love that kite, and I get why. It's got its place for sure, especially if you're a foiler.
Yeah, I think that the final perspective on that is because I love to nerd out on the kites and try to, I've got 4 different models that I use for different winds, but the reality is, I think if I just had one, if you said, here, ride this, whether it was any in the line, I think if you get used to something, you learn what it does and doesn't do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of beauty in that too.
That's
like, okay, just get something that's current, that's safe, that's well put together, and get to know it. And you'll go out and rip on that maybe more than someone that's on the proper kite for the conditions that isn't as familiar with their kite.
That's the trick. Time on the water beats gear every time.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I appreciate it. We're at 11 minutes, so I hope you guys enjoyed this dialogue format. Hopefully it gives you some perspective on these kites. If you have any other questions that we missed or more details, just hit me in the comment section, hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch you next time.